Hello, fellow food lovers. Today I will be making classic Cantonese roast pork with the crispy skinned or the crackling. You will need between 1.5 pounds of pork belly with the skin on. For the marinade, you will need 1 tablespoon Chinese cooking wine, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon sugar, 1 teaspoon Chinese white pepper, and 1 teaspoon Chinese 5-spice. The marinade for the skin, you will need 1 tablespoon of vinegar, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a dash of baking soda. The coating for the skin when baking, you will need coarse salt. Okay, so I'm going to make the marinade. For the meat. So I'm going to use 1 tablespoon of Chinese cooking wine, and 1 teaspoon of salt, one teaspoon of sugar, one teaspoon of white pepper powder, and 1 teaspoon spice powder, and 1 teaspoon of Chinese 5-spice powder. If you find that the mixture is a little dry when you mix it, add a little bit more Chinese cooking wine. It should be kind of grainy though, but if it's a little too dry, add a little bit more Chinese cooking wine. Okay, so I actually have a cut of the pork shoulder, but the best cut and the best way to get pork with skin on is to get pork belly. But this particular cut is from the pork shoulder, which is just as fine, as long as there's skin on it and there's at least an inch of meat underneath the skin. Okay, so that paste I made, I'm gonna use a basting brush and I'm gonna put that seasoning paste on the back of the pork shoulder where the meat is, and the sides of the meat as well. But do not put this on the skin. The skin will be getting a different kind of treatment. So put this on the back where the meat is and on the sides where the meat is. This will give the meat a niceness and a nice 5-spice flavor. So again, I'm using a cut of pork shoulder that has a skin on it, but the easiest way to get cut of meat with the skin on it is to get the pork belly, preferably at an Asian butcher shop or an Asian grocery store. Okay, so I got a special Chinese tool for kind of making little holes in the skin, and this is going to help the skin become crunchy and crispy. So it's basically a bunch of nails coming out of a wooden hand piece. I had to special order this from China, but you can also use a really sharp fork, a fork that has really sharp tines, or you can have 3 or 4 metal skewers and you can just hold that, use it to make the holes in the skin. You're not actually putting holes right through the skin, but you can make tiny micro holes on the surface of the skin. And that's going to help to make the skin crispy when it bakes. So I like to do that for at least maybe 3-4 minutes. Just going over the different surface areas over and over again. And so you're just doing this on the skin part only. And this is to make it crispy. Okay, so this is the fork option. You need a sharp fork. The twine should be sharp, and you can use that to make the holes in the surface of the skin. Okay, so I've got aluminum foil. I'm going to break off a piece that's the length of the meat, a little longer than the meat. So for this size of meat, I'm going to fold it in half. But you have to tailor the tin foil to the size of the meat that you have. So this is just to cover the sides and the bottom of the meat, and the skin will be exposed. And this is to help cook it evenly. So the meat on the back and the sides will be covered with tin foil, and the skin will be left exposed. So this whole process is done the day before you make it. You need to have the skin dry at least overnight or 24 hours before you cook it. So this is the day before. Okay, so the sides of the meat are covered and the back of the meat is covered. Okay, so I'm going to make the special marinade for the skin of the meat, and this is going to help dry the skin out, so it'll be more crispy. Okay, so I'm going to take 1 tablespoon of vinegar, white vinegar. And salt, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. So that's 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, 1 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to add a pinch of baking soda, just a pinch. You want to add enough baking soda so that when it makes contact with the vinegar, it's going to create fizzing. And that fizzing action is going to help dry the skin out. Okay, so I'm taking a basting brush. I'm going to spread that vinegar, salt, and baking soda mixture over the skin. And you want to be generous. Make sure it's well covered with this marinade. Okay, so we're pretty much done for the day. We won't be doing anything more until tomorrow. Okay, so that's going to the fridge. It's going to sit in the fridge overnight. So we're giving the skin a chance to dry out. So when it bakes, it'll puff up and become crispy. Okay, so this is the next day. This is day 2 now. As you can see, the skin looks a little bit more drier. So we're going to go and puncture the skin a bit more second day, just kind of reinforce the holes. So if you don't have this tool, you can also use a fork or 3 or 4 metal skewers in your hand. I actually bought this tool on Amazon. I think it was shipped from China. So that's roast pork for making the... Yeah, so that unique tool is just unique for making roast pork, for making the skin crisp. I'm going to sprinkle salt over the skin and cover it. So this is going to put the skin from burning when you do the baking. So you want to apply a thin layer of salt over the skin. And this is to just This is just to protect the skin from burning. So make sure you push the salt right to the edges of the skin. If you don't fully cover the skin and the little areas that are exposed will get burnt. Okay, so I'm setting the pork on a rack in a pan, and then it's going to go into an oven. The oven be heated at 400 degrees Fahrenheit and set on bake. So I have the pork sitting in the very middle rack, so it's not too close to the bottom burner and not to the top burner. And so it's not too close to the bottom burner or not too close to the top burner for when it broils later. Okay, so I baked it at 400 degrees for 40 minutes exactly. And then I took it out. So the meat is totally cooked now. So that was 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 minutes. So I took the meat out and I'm scraping the salt off the skin. And we'll make sure all the salt is removed from the skin. And we could take the tin foil out too. So we're going to put the meat directly on the rack. So that salt that covered the skin, you don't have to worry about the pork being salty, because that salt comes off as a sheet when it bakes. So the oven, it's still at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, but I changed it to broil now. So yeah, so I changed it from bake to broil. So the top burner's on now. And we're going to use the top burner to crisp the skin up. So it's 400 degrees Fahrenheit on broil. You still want to put the pork in the middle rack. You don't want it too close to the top burner when it's on broil, or it will burn quite easily. So you're going to bake it on broil for about 20 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. But you want to check it every 5 minutes to see if it burns. You want it to burn. You don't want the skin to burn, and it will burn quite easily. So when you have it on broil for the next 20 minutes, you want to check every 5 minutes to make sure that it hasn't burnt the skin. If the skin's starting to get dark, then turn the heat down from 400 to maybe 250 to 200. And if you have to cook it a little longer to crisp the skin up yet, but generally it would be another 20 minutes on broil after you bake it for 400 degrees for 40 minutes. So you bake it for 40 minutes, 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you set it to broil, and you set it on broil for 20 minutes on 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then it should be good. Okay, so generally when you cut the meat, you turn it upside down because the meat cuts easier than the skin. And then when you put it on the tray, make sure you have the skin up. It just looks prettier that way. So there you have it. That's Cantonese roast pork with the crispy skin, or the crackling. A very simple way of making it. Definitely a lot of secret techniques there. It's always best to have it when there's crispy skin. So that's the objective of this. Okay, bon appetit.